Hello class and welcome to the Big Comfy Chair. This week I want to tell you a little story about Teddy and his motivation. And then talk a little bit more about motivation in general and how it's seen in history. Now, personal sacrifice has always been the pinnacle of heroic acts of war. And the story I want to tell today is about Edward Teddy Sheehan. Now, Teddy was born in Tasmania in 1923 and he joined the Australian Navy in 1941 in the midst of the Second World War. And he was stationed to a Bathurst-class corvette by the name of HMAS Armadale. And he was an Oerlikon anti-aircraft gun loader. Now, his time in the Navy was fairly mundane. He got to know a lot of people. He became friends with everyone. And he was known for saying, "Hey, I love you guys." Now, his time spent in the Navy, as I mentioned, was fairly routine. In fact, you could say it was dull until November of 1942. Now, at that time, there was an Australian commando unit stationed on Timor, a Pacific island, under the colonial rule of both the Dutch and the Portuguese, but it was along the Australian coast. And the Armadale was set to go and provide some support to it as the Japanese were trying to invade. Now, in the midst of all of the travels to Timor, the Armadale was supposed to meet up with several other ships, but due to bad weather, that did not happen. And it turned out that the Japanese had found the Armadale and had started strafing its decks. Well, because the Armadale was kind of on its own, and it was decided to just make evasive maneuvers in order to buy some time and hopefully meet up with the other supporting ships. Now, what ended up happening is that very quickly the Japanese started to swarm around the Armadale, and Teddy was kept very busy with his anti-aircraft gun. Soon, Japanese bombers arrived and started to bomb and strafe the ships. The Armadale was hit, was damaged severely, and it was clear that it was time to abandon ship. Now, in the midst of the growing panic and confusion, this ordinary sailor, Teddy, was assisting in the evacuation. He was selflessly running back and forth in order to save the lives of as many of his fellow soldiers as he could. Now, during this action, he was shot twice by incoming Japanese fighter machine guns. Now, these are 56 millimeter bullets, so these are serious, serious wounds. And he would have been in his right to just say, "Okay, it's time for me to lay down in one of these lifeboats and to take care of myself," but he didn't. He was badly wounded. He'd been shot in the chest and in the back. But Teddy was determined to save his fellow sailors. So instead of getting in a lifeboat, he strapped himself into one of the Oerlikon 20 millimeter cannons and started to fire away at the Japanese bombers as his friends loaded themselves into the life rafts. Defied the order to abandon ship, and instead, while being shot twice by aircraft cannons, continued to fire back at the Japanese planes, only to be hit 2 more times by attacking aircraft. But he kept on firing. And in fact, he died continuing to fire. Indeed, as the ship fell beneath the waves, he was still firing. And tracer bullets were flying out from under the water. Teddy kept firing until he drowned, his stiff, dead fingers still holding the trigger. Now, why did he do that? Why did he continue to fight in the midst of being seriously injured? It comes back to that saying that Teddy had. I love you guys. 2,400 years ago, there was a Greek philosopher by the name of Plato. And Plato wrote a work called the Symposium, where guys got together and drank. And in this particular episode, they talked about love. And Plato writes about one of his relatives by the name of Phaedrus and what he said about love. Phaedrus is famous for a couple of things. First off, he's famous because he was a relative of Plato. But he was also well known as being an extremely handsome, radiant, wealthy man. And in his speech about love within Plato's work, Phaedrus says this, that love is the greatest motivator for humans. Because whether lover or beloved, being shamed in a lover or beloved's eyes is something we all seek to avoid. We all seek to be admired by those that we love. And indeed, this love is a great guide and motivator for life. Phaedrus goes on to say, because love is such a great motivator, that love is at the core of an army's success. In fact, he argued for an army of lovers. Phaedrus suggested that any army that consisted solely of lovers and loved ones would be unmatchable, as they would rather die than show cowardice in front of their partner. And they would all strive constantly for greater honor. Now, because that was ancient Greece, they were actually talking about eros, sexual love. But the principle of the general form of love still abides within militaries. And in fact, ancient Thebes had the idea of the sacred band. Elite troops who loved, fought, and often died together. And this is indeed something that we see in professional military culture, where the theme of a band of brothers is the core of military identity. So why did Teddy do what he did? He did that because he loved his brothers, and he wanted to protect them. And so we see that love can be a huge motivator to sacrifice yourself, to make even the ultimate sacrifice of allowing yourself to die for your friends. And that is our story for this week. You take care. Bye-bye.